The platform had been built overnight, fresh-cut pine, still weeping resin at the joints, the boards pale against the packed earth of Saebyeok's market square. Myeong Daon climbed it slowly, the way a man climbs who knows the crowd is already watching and wants them to feel the weight of each step. "Look how it prospers," he said, and his voice carried the particular ease of a man who had filled larger squares than this one. "Look how pleased with itself it has become." He let the silence work for a moment. Around him, Saebyeok spread its evidence of the past 3 years, the repaired granary, the new well casing, the schoolhouse with its oiled paper windows still glowing faintly in the morning light. The market stalls were full. Children had shoes. "They always prosper for a little while," Myeong Daon continued. "The towns that decide they no longer need heaven. That is the cruelest part of the lie. It pays, right up until the sky finishes falling." I had heard him speak before, at a distance, in Iron Ridge's own square. I had thought then that I understood what he was. I was wrong. He was better than I had given him credit for, and Saebyeok was softer ground. He did not come at the forge or the market. He was too careful for that. The forge meant warmth in winter, and iron for plows. No crowd would let you take those. Instead he went for the thing underneath, the premise, the right to know. "I do not come to take your forge or your full market," he told them, his hands open, his voice gentle with 60 years of practice. "Keep them. I come for the soul of it. They have taught your children that they may hold the truth in their own 2 hands, that a child with a brass rule needs no heaven, no priest, no mandate. My children, that is not a gift. That is the oldest pride there is, and you have watched what the sky does to pride. You have watched the light go out." An uneasy sound moved through the crowd. Not agreement. Not yet. Something softer and more dangerous. Recognition. The old ones were nodding, the slow nod of people hearing a thing named that they had felt but not spoken. The young ones glanced toward the schoolhouse. Then he pointed at the sky. The veil over Saebyeok was thinner than it had been the first time I'd ridden out here. I knew the measurements. Sorin kept them. The dome of pale light that had held for 3 generations was visibly dimmer at the edges, the way a lamp dims when the oil is nearly gone. You could see it if you looked. Everyone in that square had been looking at it for months and not saying the word. Myeong Daon said the word. "You ask why the veil fails, they will tell you it is natural, no one's fault. I tell you it dims because we have grown proud. Every gauge you read, every truth you dare to hold without heaven's leave is another tear in that sky. Put down the brass, take up the prayers your grandmothers knew, or watch the last of the light go out and know whose hands tore it." We arrived to find a basket. It was a wide harvest basket, the kind used for winnowing grain, set at the edge of the square in front of the schoolhouse steps. The grade books were already in it, 40, maybe 50 of them, the small hand-sewn records that Seol-in had spent 2 seasons teaching this town to fill. Every measurement a student had ever confirmed with their own hands, every truth they had checked and written down. Seol-in stopped walking when she saw it. "They're giving them back, Do-jin." Her voice was very quiet, the quietness of someone keeping something down by force. "The grade books. I taught half this town to read those. They're putting them in a basket to burn." I looked at the platform. Myeong Daon was still speaking, still working the crowd, and 3 of his men were positioned between us and the basket. The crowd's attention was on him. Half of them hadn't seen us arrive. "Don't go up there angry," I said. "He wants the soot-handed outlander to shout down the holy man in front of a scared town. We lose the second I make this a fight between him and me." She knew I was right. That didn't make it easier to watch. I thought about what we actually had. Not authority. He had more of that. And it was older, and it fit the shape of what frightened people reach for. Not argument. Every argument I made from the platform would be one master's word against another's, and he had the sky to point at, and I had only the ground. What I had was the one thing his world genuinely could not survive, if I could get anyone to use it. "We don't tell them he's wrong," I said. "We don't tell them I'm right. Both just ask them to pick a master. We do the one thing his world can't survive. We hand the rule to someone in that crowd and ask them to check it. Not believe me, check me." The moment one of them knows a true thing with their own hands, his sky argument is a frightened old man pointing at clouds. Sorin looked at the crowd, and if they're too afraid to take the rule. I didn't answer immediately. The honest answer was not a comfortable one. Then we lose Saebyeok today, and we come back, and we try again, and we never once make them feel stupid for being afraid. It's a slow wall, but it's the only one that holds. I didn't go to the platform. There was a woman at the edge of the crowd, near the basket, older, her hands the hands of someone who had worked a loom for 30 years, the kind of woman who had probably known Myeong Daon's name before she knew Iron Ridge existed. She was looking at the grade books with an expression I recognized, not hostility, not contempt, grief. The grief of someone who had let herself want something and was now being told the wanting was the sin. I walked to her. I held out a brass rule, one of the short ones, the kind we'd been distributing to the schools, simple enough that a child could learn it in an afternoon. I'm not going to tell you he's wrong, Mother. I'm not going to ask you to trust me instead of him. You've known him your whole life. I'm going to ask you to trust nobody. I kept my voice low, meant for her and the people immediately around her, not for the platform. Take the rule. Measure the doorpost of your own house, the one you've stood in 10,000 times. Then measure it again tomorrow when we've gone. If it ever once says a different thing to you than it says to me, then burn it, and he and I are both charlatans. But if it tells you the same true thing every time, in your hands, needing no one's blessing, then you already know who's been lying. And it isn't the brass. She looked at the rule. She looked at the basket. She did not take it. But Myeong Daon had heard me. I saw it in the way he stopped mid-sentence, the way his eyes found me across the square, with an expression I had not seen on him before. Not anger, something closer to fear, and quickly covered. You would put it in their hands, he said, not to the crowd. To me, quietly. The way you speak to someone you have just understood is more dangerous than you thought. He recovered fast. That was the thing about him. He was genuinely good at this. Burn it. The sacral anger came back into his voice, the register that had been trained over decades to sound like the sky itself speaking. Now, before the outlander dresses his pride up as a gift and hands it to your children, a town that hesitates over heresy has already half chosen it. The basket, the schoolhouse, now. The young teacher at the schoolhouse door had been standing very still since we arrived. I had met her once before, briefly. She had been an apprentice out of Iron Ridge, one of the first cohorts Soden had trained, and she had come to Saebyeok 2 years ago to run the school here. She was terrified. I could see it from across the square, the white-knuckled grip on the doorframe, the way she was breathing. She did not move. No. Her voice shook, but it carried. You can close the school, High Reader. You've the men to. But I'll not hand you the basket, and I'll tell you why in front of everyone. You're in a great hurry, for people who aren't allowed to check. Truth doesn't need to rush. Only a lie has to burn the rulers before someone measures with them. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Myeong Daon let it sit for a moment, and then he turned back to the crowd, and his voice was soft again, softer than before, almost gentle, the way a man sounds when he has already won and can afford to be kind about it. You see, engineer, they do not want your terrible freedom. They want to be kept. He nodded to his men. Burn the basket. The woman near me had not moved. She was still looking at the rule in my hand. I lowered it, not pressing, not asking again. Tomorrow then, I said, or the day after. The rule will still tell you the truth whenever you're ready to ask it. It's patient, so am I. She didn't answer. The basket caught in a few minutes, the oiled paper of the gradebook covers going first, and the smoke rose into the thin morning air below the dimming veil, and we stood there and watched it, and did not make it worse by fighting. Chayoung found me afterward, near the edge of the square where the crowd had mostly dispersed. He was watching a boy, 12, maybe 13, the age where you're old enough to understand what you're doing, but young enough to still do it, without calculating the cost. The boy had something in his closed fist. One of the short brass rules. He had kept it back from the basket, tucked inside his sleeve, and now he was standing in the shadow of the granary wall, checking the length of a timber against it, quietly, with the focused expression of someone confirming a thing they already suspected was true. Chalyung watched him for a long moment. "You kept one," he said softly, not loud enough for anyone else to hear. "Good lad. Nobody can take it back out of your hands now. That's the part they never understand. Once you've checked the thing for yourself, even once, they've already lost you. They just don't know it yet." We rode back toward Iron Ridge in the late afternoon, the four of us, and the silence lasted longer than it usually did. I was trying to think about it honestly. Not the way you think about a battle you almost won, but the way you think about a structural failure. What was the actual load? Where was the actual weakness? What would have to be different for the outcome to change? "He found the one war we can lose," I said finally. "Not the wall, not the foundry, the inside of a frightened person's head, and we can't outride him to every square." Eun-ha had been quiet for most of the ride, the way she gets quiet when she is working something through by feel rather than by argument. She looked up. "No, but you are still trying to win his way, square by square, trust by trust. Stop." She let the horse's pace fill the silence for a moment. "His God is dying in his own hands. I have seen it, you have seen it. The day it dies in front of the people, the day the sky finishes failing, and his prayers visibly do nothing, while our wall and our grain still stand, that is the day the argument ends. Not because we won it, because the heavens conceded it. We need only be standing, useful, when his proof fails in public." I thought about the woman who hadn't taken the rule. I thought about the boy who had kept one anyway. Eun-ha was right. The clock wasn't the crowd. The clock was the veil itself, and it was running in our direction whether Myeong Daon knew it or not. The question was whether we would still be standing and useful when it ran out. It was not a comfortable thing to wait for, but she was right that it was the only proof that would actually end it. That night, in the guest room of the Saebyeok way station, I couldn't sleep, and I found myself thinking about Myeong Daon, not as an obstacle, but as a man. He had won the day. He had the basket, the closed school, the crowd's frightened gratitude. By any measure of the square, the day was his. I thought about what it would feel like to go back to your room after a day like that, and kneel in the vigil robes, and trace the sign, and wait, and feel nothing rise. He had been doing this for decades, frightening children back into the arms of a God he served with genuine conviction, a God whose silence he had learned to interpret as patience, as mystery, as the inscrutable will of heaven. He had built his entire life on the premise that the silence meant something, that the failing light was a test rather than an ending. What did you do with a day like today, when you had won every argument and the God still didn't answer? When you had done everything right, by every measure you had ever been given, and the right sat dead in your hands, and the smoke from the grade books had long since blown away, and there was nothing in the room but the sound of your own breathing? I didn't know. I only knew what I had heard, later, from someone who had been passing the way station's prayer room in the small hours, and had stopped, uncertain whether to knock. A whisper through the door, barely audible. "I kept them for you. I frightened children back into your arms today, in your name. The least you could do is answer. Anything, a wisp, a single curl of smoke." A long silence. "Please, after everything I have done to be wrong for you, would it cost you so much to be real?"